We continue with the tribe of Dan. The tribe of Dan are ancient Greeks, ancestors of the Danes and the Irish and the Scottish. And of course, they were all through Europe. This was a Celtic coin found from 4th century BC, and it's the profile of Alexander the Great wearing the ram's horns that were given to him by the high priest of Egypt in Heliopolis of Egypt, claiming that, yes, Alexander the Great was a son of a god, the son of a god, because they made him Pharaoh of Egypt. That was after he went to the temple in Jerusalem, where the high priests of the Hebrews told him of the prophecy of the prophet Daniel, and that it was him that the archangel Gabriel was informing the prophet Daniel about, that he would put an end to the Persian Empire as he did. So we continue with part 2 of the Danites, the tribe of Dan, who populated Ireland, Scotland, and of course the Scandinavian area. And we go to part 2, concerning the mighty Hercules. Now, let's go back to the Promised Land. We saw that Dan was in the area of Joppa, right on the Mediterranean Sea. We said that they had populated Cyprus, and Cretans were the Philistines that populated the area of the land of Canaan. Yes, the Philistines were Cretans from Crete. It's also written in the Old Testament of the Holy Bible. Now, mighty Hercules, the legend of Hercules, told from ancient times till today, but many people have not made the connection between Hercules and Samson of the Old Testament, of the tribe of Dan. Samson was of the tribe of Dan. Hercules, of course, being Greek. And they say that he was born in Thebes of Greece. That's about an hour's drive north of Athens, Greece. Now, the similarities between the two are obvious. Samson was a judge in Israel, the tribe of Dan, and was of the tribe of Dan, as we said. The Danites, when traveling to Greece, having still commerce and trade with Tyre of the area that was given to Dan of the 12 tribes of the land of the Promised Land. Dan in the area of Tyre, as we said, on the seacoast, just opposite Cyprus. Who were the tribes of Asher, still communicating with the Danites of the Promised Land, knew and heard about Samson, their judge, and all his exploits. Coming back to Greece, the stories of Samson were told. Interestingly enough, the Encyclopedia of the Classical World states, quote, "The tales of his heroic deeds lend to the supposition that Hercules was originally a historic figure," unquote. Of course, that is Samson. Both Hercules and Samson were incredibly strong. Both killed a lion with their bare hands. Both were virtually invincible. One important event in Hercules' life involving his escaping from the clutches of a symbolic woman who is called Pleasure. This corresponds directly to the trouble Samson got himself into with the harlots of Canaan. In the book titled Gods, Heroes, and Men of Ancient Greece by W.H.D. Rouse, he writes about Hercules' slaying of the lion. Quote, "Hercules threw down his bow and arrow and leaped upon the lion's back, while he pulled his hands around the lion's neck, gripping the lion's throat with his 2 hands, and bending him backwards, throttled him. There lay the lion dead on the ground." In other words, he snapped the lion's neck. That's on page 59 of that book. Now, in the Holy Bible, Judges 13:6 says Samson actually tore the lion in 2, but the ancient historian Flavius Josephus in his Antiquities of Jews also tells us that Samson first strangled the lion, which is exactly as Hercules is said to have done. Now, we don't even know if there were ever any lions in Greece. Well, I believe there were, because there are a number of statues of lions found in Greece and lying in as statues in various Greek museums. We know that there were not only lions, there were leopards, there were various types of animals roaming around in Greece and Italy. The thing is that they were depleted because of the fact that in the Colosseum, these animals were needed for the gladiators to fight against. And that's why they have now become extinct in the area of Europe, because the people of the rounding up the animals in order to replenish the Colosseum gladiator games are the cause of these animals going extinct in Europe. And this is what I was told when I visited Rome, an area just outside of the Fiumicino airport in Rome. I was waiting for flights. I had a couple of hours to spare, and they were kind enough, because our flight was delayed, to give us a free tour of the area where they kept the animals. Very well kept area. It was ancient Roman brick and ancient cement structures on the coast, where the ships would come, unload the animals, and they would be put there in these built brick stables, awaiting their turn in the Colosseum. And that's how the animals became extinct, just as a matter of information. So, in fact, the Greek myth explains one way as the offspring of a monster. Whether there were lions in Greece is not important. Hercules needed to find one anyway. Why? Simply because biblical Samson inspired the Greek legend called Hercules, provided the basis for his life, they say. This is what this writer, W.H. Rouse, believes. Why is he called Hercules? The word Hercules in Greek is Heracles, which is virtually identical with the Hebrew plural word for traders, Heraklim. The Hebrew word for traders is Heraklim, Hercules, Heracles in Greek. And Hercules is said to have come from Argos himself. Argos. Well, we know he was born supposedly in Thebes, that's an hour north of Greece, of Athens. The Greek myths tell that the people of Argos are from the Danae, were descendants from patriarch Danaos, who was the son of Bela in the Bible. The Hebrew patriarch Dan was the son of the concubine Bilhah. This is Genesis 30, verses 3 to 6. Then we come to the testimony of Josephus, the Jewish historian. Josephus, the Jewish historian, shows that the Lacedaemonian Spartans of Greece were actually Israelites. Well, we know that. We said that before in the previous two videos. Yes, they were Danites, they were Israelites, and as is written in the Holy Bible in the book of the Maccabees, the Spartans wrote a letter to the Maccabees saying that they had an ancient document showing that they were children of Abraham, just as the Maccabees were. Therefore, they had a strong alliance. They were allies after that, because they were not only allies, but they were cousins by blood. So, they were actually Israelites, the Spartans of Greece, and therefore closely related to the Jews. Josephus relates an incredible letter from Sparta to Judah. It says, quote, Jonathan, the high priest of the Jewish nation, to the Ephori and Senate of the people of Lacedaemonians, send greetings. Quote, when in former times an epistle was brought to Onias, who was then our high priest, we have discovered that both the Jews and the Lacedaemonians, that's meaning the Spartans, are of one stock. They are derived from the kindred of Abraham. Concerning the kindred that was between us and you, a copy of which is here subjoined, we both joyfully received the epistle, because we are well satisfied about it from the sacred writings. Yet did not we think fit first to begin the claim of this relation to you, the glory which is now given us by you. It is a long time since this relation of ours to you hath been renewed, and when we, upon holy and festive days, offer sacrifices to God, we pray to him for your preservation, and victory. You will therefore do well yourselves to write us and send us an account of what you stand in need from us, since we are in all things disposed to act according to your desires. This letter is foursquare, and the seal is an eagle with a dragon, snake, or serpent in its claws, end quote. Unbelievable, isn't it? That was the banner of the tribe of Dan. The Lacedaemonians received the Jewish ambassadors carrying the letter kindly and made a decree of friendship and mutual assistance with the Jews, and then sent the letter to their Lacedaemonian kinsmen. Another Jewish high priest, Jonathan, somewhat later than Onias, wrote the Spartans concerning the kindred that was between us and you, because we are well satisfied about it from the sacred writings. Long time since the relationship of ours to you have been renewed, and when we upon holy and festive days offer sacrifice, pray for him, to him for your preservation and victory. In ancient mythology, Bryant relates that Stephanus Byzantium shows that Alexander Porphyster and Claudius Geolaus also speak of a direct relationship between the Spartan Greeks and the people of Judea. The Spartans we have identified as the tribe of Simeon, who were prophesied to be scattered all over Israel, living under the realm of the Grecian Danites. Their tribal standard would be secondary to the main tribal standard of Greece, which is Dan's tribal standard. The Danites leave Greece for Ireland. Quote, the Danites ruled about 2 centuries until the arrival of Milesians, which took place 1,000 years before the Christian era. Thus, the date of arrival of the first colony of Danites would be around 1200 BC, or 85 years after Deborah and Barak's victory, when we are told Dan had ships. And the early connection with Greece, Phoenicia, and Egypt is constantly alluded throughout the chronicles of Ireland and records of the Irish Danans. Dan, pioneer of Israel, page 30-31, emphasis added. This first batch of Danites that went to Israel were called the Tuatha de Danaan. The word Tuath simply means tribe. Tuath, Irish history, a tribe, or people in Ireland. That's from the New English Dictionary or Historical Principles. The Milesians were a group of people who, quote, in old manuscripts of Ireland, the Milesians and the Danans were of the same race. They came in batches from Greece and Phoenicia. Dan, the Power of Israel, J.C. Grawler, page 30. There was a second group of Danites to migrate from Greece to Ireland. It was this group of Danites who migrated to Ireland via Spain and Greece with the royal family of David and set up the throne of David at Tara in the days of Jeremiah. Unbelievable stuff. The third group of Danites. The remaining Danites migrated north 30 miles away from Tyre. These Danites that migrated north to Laish. They are named the city of Dan. This is from Judges 18, verse 29. Moses had prophesied, quote, Dan is a lion's whelp. He shall leap from Bashan, end quote. Deuteronomy 33:22. Bashan was the location of the inland Danites. Therefore, a great many of them must have leapt from inland Palestine, as probably the majority would later at the time of the Assyrian invasion of Israel. In the invasions of Israel by the Assyrians, they took, quote, in the days of Pekah, king of Israel, came Tiglath-Pileser, king of Assyria, and took Ijon and Abel-Beth Maha. Anyway, in other words, notice that Dan is not mentioned during the time of Assyrian invasion. Did they leap out of Palestine to avoid the invasion altogether? Well, probably. Historical evidence suggests that the inland Danites migrated northward into the Black Sea area. One can understand the situation of the Danites. With many of their people gone to Greece and Ireland, the tribe must have been depleted. With the soon coming invasion of Assyrians, they must have thought that if we don't get out of this area, there will be none of us left, therefore avoiding leaping out of the land, escaping the invasion altogether to save themselves, of course. In the Black Sea region, It's interesting, keeping with the tradition of naming places after Dan, their father, the rivers emptying the Black Sea area used to be named Ister, Tiras, and Borysthenes and Tenais. After the arrival there, the names of the rivers were all changed to Danube, the Dniester, and the Don, all having Dan root names. Dan, the serpent's trail. Jacob prophesied that Dan would be a serpent by the way, an adder by the path. Genesis 9:16-17, meaning that he would leave a trail wherever he would go. When the Danites migrated to Ireland, they left a trail of names throughout Europe. In Hebrew, there are no vowels, so the name Dan is written DN, or in Hebrew equivalent, Dun. The words like Dun, Din, Don, Dun, Dan, Dun correspond to the name of Dan. Professor Taunton declares, quote, "There's no grander theme upon the scrolls of history than the story of the struggle of the Anglo-Saxon westward. The very streams of Europe mark their resting places, and in the root of nearly all their ancient names, Dan or Don. Donald, recall the sacred stream Jordan River of rest, from whose hands, so far away in exiles, they set out. It was either the little colony of Dan, obeying its tribal proclivity, for naming everything it captured." Judges 18, verse 1-29, after their father Dan, or else the mere survival of a word and custom. But nonetheless, it serves to trace these wanderers like a trail. Hence the Danube River, the Dnieper River, the Dniester, the Danau, the Dasi, the Davi, the Dan, the Don, the Udon, the Eridon, and 1,000 other Dans and Dons of ancient and early geography down the Danes in Denmark, or Dan's last resting place. Quoted in Allen, Judah's Scepter and Joseph's Birthright, page 263-64. Now Denmark, the name of the modern country in Europe, north of Germany, means literally Dan's Mark. Denmark, Dan's Mark. These people are called Danes. In fact, because at one time Denmark ruled all the surrounding area, the whole region took its name from them, Scandinavia. Scandinavia, Dan again. Clearly, here are remnants of people of Dan who migrated westward overland from the Caucasus to their present location in northern Europe. And according to the late Danish tradition, Jutland, the mainland of Denmark, was captured by Dan, the ancestor of the Danes, from whom their name derives, Denmark. Encyclopedia Britannica, Volume 8. The Danes claim the descent from Dan the Great, meaning Dan of Israel. This is from Saxo-Germanicus, the first 9 books of the Saxo-Germanicus of Danish history. Unbelievable. So we found the tribe of Dan. They're all over the British Isles, Scandinavia, Denmark. Amazing. And of course they come from the Holy Land, the land of the milk and honey, the promised land, and they fled in order to save themselves, and they left a trail of naming everything after them all the way up to Denmark. In Ireland today, we find their customary evidence, their place names in abundance, such as Dan's Low, Dan Sawyer, Dan Monison, Dundalk, Dundrum, Donegal Bay, Donegal City, Dunglow, Londonderry, as well as Dingle, Dungarvan, and Dunsmore, which means more Danes. More Dans. It should be plain that the ancient Danites settled in Ireland. Most of them dwell in that land today. And it's certainly no coincidence that in the Irish Gaelic language, the word Dun or Dun, D-U-N-N, which is a very Irish name, surname Dun, means judge, just as Dan does in Hebrew. So, prophecy is fulfilled. Jacob said that Dan is a serpent that, quote, biteth the horse's heel, so that his rider shall fall backwards, unquote. Genesis 49, verse 17. Here the Danites are pictured in the last days as under the heel biting the horse. The Irish were governed by the British, the rider, that is, until the early 1920s. The Irish won their independence via a terrorist campaign against British representatives, that is, nipping at the heels of the British government, and the Bible describes the manner in which the Irish obtained their independence. This continues today with the IRA, or trying to overthrow British rule in Northern Ireland. It's not open warfare, it's nipping at the heels. Jacob also says that Dan shall judge his people as one of the tribes of Israel. Genesis 49:16. As quoted from the pulpit commentary earlier, Dan would be, quote, performing the office of an ambassador among the people, not of his own tribe merely, but also of all of Israel, emphasis added. The future. The 144,000 of the tribe of Israel that will stand on Mount Zion with Christ when he comes does not include Dan. Why? Some blame it on ancient scribal error in copying an original document sometime in the far distant past, and this error was copied from then until the present. Others say Dan received their inheritance before all the other tribes, therefore not listed. So, by the way, 144,000 is just a very huge number. 12 times 12 thousands. It's just a symbolic number. These explanations do not satisfy. Revelation 7:4 says, all the tribes of the children of Israel are listed as the 144,000, 12 times 12. So why does it say Manasseh instead of Dan? The solution is simple. Dan is split into two nations, Ireland and Denmark. Ireland is Catholic. 80% of Danes are Lutheran. Today, the tribe of Dan in Ireland is still giving into idolatry following traditions of their ancestors. They are a nation, an integral part of false mystery system God labeled as Mystery Babylon the Great in Revelation 17:5. Notice Revelation 2 verse 20, the same false church likened to be wicked woman Jezebel, which called herself the prophetess. Now, if this Denmark will be a part of 144,000, how can we know? The clue is the name Manasseh. Back in Judges, the 18th chapter, in inland Danites who moved to Denmark when they migrated to Laish and named it Dan after their father. Afterwards, the children of Dan, quote, set up the graven image, and Jonathan, the son of Gershom, the son of Manasseh, he and his sons who were priests to the tribe of Dan until the day of the captivity of the land, end quote. The Septuagint has Manasseh just like the book of Revelation. God is telling us that it is Denmark and not Ireland that will have 12,000 that will rule with Christ on Mount Zion. The Irish will have to go through the plagues, watch the Catholic Church be destroyed, Revelation 18. Jesus himself to help them come out of idolatry that they have been steeped into for centuries. Okay, that was more of a, in this article, more of a church thing, sectarian thing. This is an article by Peter Salemi, BritishIsrael.ca. We briefed parts of this, and obviously I've read parts of this in other areas. Very interesting thing. So we found the tribe of Dan all the way up to through Ireland and Scotland, all the way into Scandinavia, by way, of course, of the Holy Land, the area of the tribe of Dan, through Greece, into the Northern Europe areas. This is end of part 2. Please subscribe, and please let me know your comments and your ideas about series such as these.